A 9-year-old boy just destroyed a wedding in front of 200 guests. He walked down the aisle carrying a newborn baby and said 5 words that shattered everything. "She died calling your name." The groom, Garrett Ashford, stood frozen, staring at a son he never knew existed and a daughter he never knew was born. The bride screamed. The wedding collapsed. But that's not the full story. 6 months later, Garrett sits alone in his home office, surrounded by boxes from Isabel Moreno's county storage facility. Everything she owned when she died. Everything the state had kept while they searched for next of kin. His hands shake as he opens the first box. Inside, clothes that still smell of her perfume, books with margins full of her handwriting, and a leather journal dated 4 months before Isabel's cancer diagnosis. What Garrett reads destroys him. Because the story everyone thought they knew, about a man who abandoned a woman 10 years ago, that wasn't the whole truth. There was another night. Another betrayal. And Isabel carried that secret to her grave. Until now. What happened that night 4 months before Isabel's diagnosis? Why did Garrett return after 9 years of silence? And why did Isabel hide this from everyone, including her own son? The answers are buried in these boxes. In letters she wrote but never sent. In medical records she kept locked away. In a single photograph she tucked inside a book of poetry, showing a man on her doorstep at midnight. Ethan doesn't know this part of the story yet. He's 12 years old now, learning to trust a father who was never there. But the truth has a way of surfacing. And when it does, it will change everything. Before we reveal what really happened, let us know in the comments what you think happened. And if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back now. Because what you're about to learn will rewrite everything you thought you knew. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was late October, 9 years after Garrett first disappeared. Isabel was 32 years old, still working 2 jobs, still raising Ethan alone. She had built a life without Garrett. She didn't talk about him anymore. She didn't look at his photos. She had learned to be enough for herself and her son. Then one night, at 11:47 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Isabel almost didn't answer. No one visited that late. But something made her look through the peephole. And there he was. Garrett Ashford. Older, wearing an expensive coat that looked wrong against the backdrop of her shabby apartment building. His face was different. Harder, more lined, but his eyes were the same. The eyes that had once promised her everything. Isabel should have slammed the door. She should have called the police. She should have protected herself from the man who had shattered her heart and abandoned his child. But she didn't. She opened the door. Garrett stood there, rain dripping from his hair, and said, "I'm sorry. I know I have no right to be here. But I needed to see you. I needed to tell you that I'm sorry." Isabel's voice was ice. 9 years. You've been gone for 9 years. Ethan is 9 years old. You missed everything. "I know," Garrett said. "I know, and I hate myself for it. Every single day, I hate myself." He told her he'd been living in Sacramento, building a business, making money, constructing a life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow inside. He told her he thought about her constantly, about the son he'd never met, about the promises he'd broken. He told her he was engaged now, to Vanessa, a woman his business partners had introduced him to, but that he couldn't go through with the wedding until he made things right with his past. Isabel laughed. A bitter, broken sound. "You want absolution? You want me to tell you it's okay that you destroyed us? That you can go marry your perfect woman and live your perfect life and I'll just forgive you?" "No," Garrett said. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I remember. That you weren't nothing to me. That I was a coward, but I did love you. Once." Those words, "I did love you," cut through Isabel's defenses like a blade. Because she had spent 9 years telling herself that what they had wasn't real. That Garrett had been using her. That she had been naive and stupid to believe in him. But hearing him say he had loved her, even if it was past tense, even if it changed nothing, made something inside her crack open. She let him in. They sat in her tiny living room, drinking coffee that neither of them touched, and talked for hours. Garrett asked about Ethan. Isabel showed him photos. Pictures of a serious little boy with his father's jawline and his mother's quiet strength. Pictures of birthday parties Isabel had thrown alone, school plays she had attended alone, every milestone she had navigated without him. Garrett cried. Actual tears running down his face as he looked at what he'd missed. "Can I meet him?" Garrett asked. "No," Isabel said. "You don't get to walk in and out of his life. If you're not going to stay, you don't get to exist for him." "I can't stay," Garrett admitted. "I have a life in Sacramento. A business. Vanessa. I can't just—" "Then you can't meet him," Isabel said. "You made your choice 9 years ago. You don't get to make another one now." They argued. About responsibility. About cowardice. About all the ways Garrett had failed and all the ways Isabel had survived without him. But underneath the anger, there was something else. The ghost of what they'd once had. The memory of nights when they'd believed they could build something together. The phantom pain of love that had died but never quite finished bleeding out. And then, in the early hours of the morning, exhausted and raw and desperate, they reached for each other. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about grief. About two people who had once meant everything to each other trying to find some kind of closure in the wreckage of what they'd destroyed. They were intimate. One last time. One final goodbye. When Isabel woke up at dawn, Garrett was gone. No note this time either. Just an empty space where he'd been sleeping and the smell of his cologne fading from her sheets. Isabel sat on the edge of her bed and cried. Not because she thought he would stay. She had known he wouldn't. But because she had let herself hope, just for a few hours, that maybe he had changed. That maybe he was brave enough to choose her. He wasn't. He never would be. Isabel told no one about that night. Not her friends. Not her therapist. Not Ethan, who asked the next morning why she looked so sad. She buried it. She pretended it never happened. She went back to work, back to her routine, back to being enough for herself and her son. She didn't know she was pregnant. The symptoms came slowly: fatigue, nausea, weight changes, but Isabel attributed them to stress. She was working 60-hour weeks. She was barely sleeping. Of course her body felt wrong. Then in February, 4 months after Garrett's visit, Isabel started experiencing severe abdominal pain. That's when she went to the emergency room. That's when they found the cancer. Stage 3 ovarian cancer, aggressive and spreading fast. The doctors said she needed to start treatment immediately. They ran tests. They did ultrasounds. They checked everything. And that's when they found the second heartbeat. Dr. Sarah Chen, Isabel's oncologist, sat across from her in the small consultation room and delivered news that felt like a nightmare. You're pregnant. Approximately 16 weeks. Isabel couldn't breathe. That's not possible. I haven't. But she stopped. Because it was possible. October. The night Garrett came back. The night she had been too heartbroken to think about protection or consequences or anything except the need to feel something other than pain. We need to discuss your options, Dr. Chen said gently. The cancer is aggressive. We need to start chemotherapy immediately if we want to give you the best chance of survival. But the drugs we need to use are not safe for fetal development. If you continue the pregnancy, we'll have to delay treatment. And that delay could be fatal. Isabel stared at the ultrasound image Dr. Chen placed in front of her. A tiny form, barely recognizable as human. A second child. Garrett's child. A baby conceived in grief and abandonment, now growing inside a body that was already betraying her. If we delay treatment, what happens to me? Isabel asked. Your 5-year survival rate drops to less than 20%, Dr. Chin said. If you delay until the baby is viable, another 20 weeks, the cancer will likely spread beyond your ability to treat it effectively. And if I terminate, we can start treatment within days. Your odds improve significantly. Isabel went home and didn't tell anyone. She sat in her apartment while Ethan was at school and stared at the ultrasound photo. She thought about Garrett, hating him life in Sacramento, planning his wedding to Vanessa, completely unaware that he had left behind another child. She thought about calling him, about telling him the truth, about making him face the consequences of that night. But what would be the point? He had already proven twice now that he wasn't capable of staying, that he wasn't capable of choosing her. She would delay treatment as long as possible. Not because she believed in miracles, not because she thought she would survive, but because she couldn't bring herself to end this life growing inside her. This unplanned, impossible life that existed because for one night, she had let herself believe that love was something that could be resurrected from the dead. She knew what it meant. She knew she was choosing this baby over herself. But Isabel had spent 9 years being a mother. She had learned that motherhood was about sacrifice, about putting another life ahead of your own, about loving someone so completely that your own survival became secondary. So she stayed silent. She told the doctors she wanted to delay treatment. She watched the cancer spread through her body like wildfire while the baby grew. She documented everything in her journal, the choice she made, the reasons why, the guilt of knowing that Ethan might lose his mother because she couldn't let go of a man who had already let go of her. And she wrote letters. Letters to Garrett that she never sent. Letters that explained everything. Letters that said, "You came back for one night. You gave me hope and then you took it away again. And this is the atonement, is the proof that you never really loved me. Because if you had, you would have stayed. But maybe she's also the proof that I never really stopped loving you." Isabel kept working as long as she could. She hid the pregnancy under loose clothes and blamed her changing body on the cancer. When she finally got too sick to work, she told everyone she was starting treatment. She didn't tell them she was actually pregnant or give birth. By the time May arrived, Isabel was dying. The cancer had spread to her liver, her lungs, her bones. She could barely walk. She spent most of her time in the hospital, hooked up to machines that monitored both her failing body and the baby who was somehow still fighting to live inside her. Ethan visited every day after school. He held her hand and read to her and tried to be strong. But he was 9 years old and watching his mother disappear, and there was nothing strong about that. He was just surviving. One afternoon in early May, Isabel called Ethan to her bedside. She was lucid for the first time in days, and she knew she didn't have much time left. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About your father." She told Ethan that she had found Garrett, that he was living in Sacramento, that he was getting married, and then she told him about the night he came back. She didn't include the pregnancy. She didn't include Grace. She said, "If something happens to me, I want you to find him. I want you to tell him the truth." "What truth?" Ethan asked. Isabel looked at her son, this beautiful, serious boy who had never asked to be born into this mess. "That we existed," she said. "That we mattered. That he can't just pretend we never happened." But Isabel didn't tell Ethan about the pregnancy. She couldn't. Because if she told him she was carrying his sister, if she told him she had chosen this baby over her own survival, Ethan would blame himself. He would think his mother loved this baby more than she loved him. And that wasn't true. Isabel loved Ethan more than anything in the world. But she also loved this baby. This impossible, unwanted, beautiful mistake of a baby. And she couldn't explain that to a 9-year-old who was already losing everything. So she kept it secret, even from her son. Especially from her son. On May 10th, Isabel's body finally gave out. She went into labor, premature and dangerous. Grace was born weighing 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Isabel held her daughter for 3 hours. She whispered to her about the night she was conceived, about the father who didn't know she existed, about the brother who would protect her. And then Isabel closed her eyes and said Garrett's name one last time. Not because she forgave him, but because even after everything, even at the very end, she couldn't stop loving him. And that was the cruelest truth of all. 6 months later, Garrett sits in his office, Isabel's journal open in front of him, and understands for the first time the magnitude of what he destroyed. He reads about the night he came back. The night he told Isabel he loved her and then disappeared again at dawn. The night Grace was conceived. He reads about Isabel's choice. The cancer diagnosis. The pregnancy she hid from everyone. The decision to die so her daughter could live. He reads the unsent letters. Page after page of Isabel's handwriting, shaky toward the end, telling him things she never had the courage to say out loud. I kept hoping you'd come back. Not just that night in October, but every day after. I kept thinking maybe you'd realize what you'd lost. Maybe you'd choose us. But you didn't. You chose yourself. You always chose yourself. And I can't even hate you for it. Because I loved you enough for both of us. I loved you enough to die for the child you'll never know you gave me. You chose yourself. You always chose yourself. And I can't even hate you for it. Garrett is still sitting there, tears streaming down his face, when there's a knock. Ethan walks in. He's 12 now, living with Garrett, learning to let him be something resembling a father. What are you reading? Ethan asks. Garrett looks up. He should lie. He should protect Ethan from this. But he's done lying. Your mother's journals, Garrett says. From before she died. Ethan's expression hardens. And I need to tell you something, Garrett says. About Grace. About how she was born. I already know, Ethan says. The doctors said it was a cryptic pregnancy or something. That mom didn't know she was pregnant because... No, Garrett interrupts. That's not what happened. He tells Ethan everything. About the night he went back to see Isabel. About the fight and the tears and the moment of weakness that created Grace. About Isabel's choice to die so Grace could live. Ethan stares at him. You came back. Yes. You came back and you left again? Yes. And you got her pregnant and you didn't even know? I didn't know. She never told me. She never. Ethan's voice is deadly quiet. She died because of you. Not just the first time when you left, but the second time too. She died because she couldn't let go of you, even when you proved, over and over, that you weren't worth holding on to. I know, Garrett whispers. She chose Grace over herself because of you. Because you made her think, for one night, that maybe you still loved her. And then you disappeared again. And she was too proud to tell you. Too proud to make you face what you'd done. So she just died. Ethan's voice breaks. She died because you made her hope. Garrett has no defense. No excuse. No words that could possibly make this right. Ethan turns to leave, then stops. Did you love her? That night you went back. Did you actually love her? Garrett thinks about Isabel's face in the lamplight. About the way she'd looked at him like he was both her greatest hope and deepest disappointment. About how he'd held her and known, even then, that he was going to leave again. Yes, he says. I loved her. I was just too much of a coward to choose her. Then you didn't love her, Ethan says. Because love isn't about feeling something. It's about staying. And you never stayed. Not once. He walks out, leaving Garrett alone with Isabel's journals and the weight of everything he can never undo. Over the next few weeks, the truth spreads through their fragile new family like poison. Grace is 3 years old now, too young to understand. But Ethan understands. And Ethan can't forgive. He stops talking to Garrett unless absolutely necessary. He spends more time in his room, reading his mother's old books, looking at photos from before everything fell apart. Garrett tries to reach him, tries to explain. But how do you explain abandoning someone twice? How do you justify being the reason a woman chose death? One night, Garrett finds Ethan sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars. He sits down beside him without asking permission. "Your mother wrote you a letter," Garrett says quietly. "In her journal. She wrote it the day before she died." Ethan doesn't look at him. "I don't want to hear it. She knew you'd be angry. She knew you'd blame me. She wanted you to know why she made the choices she made." "She died because of you," Ethan says. "That's all I need to know." "She died because she loved Grace," Garrett says. "She chose Grace over herself. Not because she didn't love you, but because she loved you both so much she couldn't choose." "And why was Grace even conceived?" Ethan's voice is sharp. "Because you showed up for one night? Because you wanted to feel better about yourself?" "You're right," Garrett says. "You're absolutely right. I destroyed your mother's life. Twice. And I have to live with that every single day." He pauses. "But your mother made her choice. She chose to let me in that night. She chose to believe one more time that I might be capable of change. And she chose Grace. She chose to give her daughter life even when it cost her everything. Those were her choices. And they were brave, even if they shouldn't have been necessary." Ethan finally looks at him. His eyes are red. "I hate you. I know. I'll never forgive you for what you did to her. I don't expect you to." "Then why do you keep trying?" Ethan demands. "Why are you still here? Why don't you just leave like you always do?" Garrett's voice is steady. "Because I'm done running. Because your mother deserved better than a man who loved her and left. Because you and Grace deserve a father who shows up, even when it's hard, even when you hate me, even when I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ethan. I'm asking for a chance to be better than I was." "That's a pretty low bar," Ethan says bitterly. "I know." They sit in silence for a long time. Finally, Ethan says, "Read me the letter. The one she wrote." Garrett pulls out his phone and opens the photo he took of Isabel's journal page. He reads, "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I know you're angry. I know you blame your father. And maybe you should. But I need you to know something. I chose this. I chose Grace. Not because I loved you less, but because I couldn't save both of us, and I couldn't let another man be greater burden than losing you. She'll have you. And for yours. Because carrying hate is exhausting, and you've already carried too much. Grace will never know me. But she'll have you. And you, my beautiful boy, are the bravest person I've ever known. You're stronger than your father ever was. Stronger than I am. Take care of your sister. Teach her about me. And try, if you can, to forgive your father. Not for his sake, but for yours. Because carrying hate is exhausting, and you've already carried too much. I love you. I'm sorry I'm leaving. But I need you to know, every single day I spent being your mother was the greatest honor of my life. Love, Mom." When Garrett finishes reading, Ethan is crying. Silent tears running down his face. He doesn't say anything. He just stands up and walks inside. But the next morning, when Garrett makes breakfast, Ethan sits at the table. He doesn't smile. He doesn't forgive. But he's there. And for now, that's enough. 3 years have passed since that night Garrett found the truth in Isabel's apartment. Today, he stands in a cemetery in Northern California, holding Grace's hand while Ethan places fresh flowers on their mother's grave. Isabel Moreno's headstone is simple but beautiful, engraved with words Garrett chose himself, "Beloved Mother." Her love lives on in the children she gave everything for. Garrett visits every month now, always bringing Ethan and Grace. He talks to Isabel's grave, telling her about their lives, Ethan's straight A's, Grace's first day of preschool, the small victories and struggles of raising children he should have known from the start. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he says quietly, like he does every visit. "But I promise you, I won't fail them again." Ethan, now 12, stands beside him. Their relationship is still complicated. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But slowly, they're becoming something like father and son. Ethan calls him Garrett, not Dad. Maybe one day that will change. Maybe it won't. Either way, Garrett shows up. Grace, 3 years old, will never remember her mother. But she knows Isabel's face from photographs. She knows her mother's favorite songs. She knows she was loved before she took her first breath. Garrett sold his company. He works from home now, consulting part-time so he can be there for school pickups and homework and bedtime stories. The life he built on lies and ambition crumbled, but what rose from the ashes is real. Messy and imperfect, but real. He never remarried. Some wounds don't deserve quick healing. Some debts can never fully be repaid. But every night, he tucks his children into bed. And every morning, he wakes up and tries again. Isabel kept everything hidden because she was protecting Garrett's secret, the secret he should have owned himself. She documented her life, her struggles, her love, all while shielding the man who abandoned her. And in the end, her silence nearly erased her children's futures. The truth came out not because Garrett found his conscience, but because a 9-year-old boy walked 100 miles carrying his baby sister, refusing to let his family be forgotten. So here's the question this story demands we ask. How many Isabels are out there right now? How many women are carrying secrets that protect men who don't deserve protection? How many children are growing up not knowing their fathers' names because someone decided it was easier to disappear than to stay? Garrett Ashford got a second chance he didn't earn. He's trying to make it right, but nothing he does will bring Isabel back. Nothing will give Ethan those first 9 years. Nothing will let Grace know her mother's voice. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the lesson isn't about redemption. Maybe it's about consequences. About the weight of choices. About the lives we shatter when we decide our comfort matters more than someone else's truth. Ethan made a choice too. At 9 years old, he chose love over safety. He chose his sister over his own survival. He chose to honor his mother even when the world had given him every reason to give up. That's the real story. Not the man who came back, but the boy who refused to let go. If this story made you think about the secrets we keep and the truths we owe each other, share it. Not because it's dramatic, but because somewhere, someone needs to hear that their story matters. That their children matter. That truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for. What would you have done in Ethan's place? What would you do in Garrett's? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us for more stories that challenge us to be better than we were yesterday.